My name is Aurora, I'm 26 years old and I've been married to Mason, who's 29, for almost 3 years. We live in a small town near Austin, Texas, where the summers are scorching, and so are the family dynamics. From the moment I joined Mason's family, I felt the chill from his mother, Sylvia, and his 2 siblings, Kylie, 24, and Ethan, 22. They always kept a strange distance from me, as if I had barged into their perfect little world. Mason used to tell me not to worry and just let things be, but deep down I couldn't accept it. I believed that if I tried hard enough and showed them kindness, they'd eventually come around. Mason, always gentle, once held my hand and said, "Aurora, you don't have to earn their affection. The right people will recognize your heart." But I was stubborn, maybe a little naive, and I thought, if I never try, I'll always be the outsider. So when I heard Sylvia was turning 50, a major milestone, I saw it as the perfect chance to prove my goodwill. I would throw her a birthday party to remember, something that might rewrite the old impressions. I started planning everything in early April, personally picking the venue, the menu, and the decorations. I chose an upscale French restaurant in downtown Austin. Sylvia had once told Mason how much she loved the French dinners there. I contacted the restaurant management, put down a sizable deposit to reserve the weekend of her birthday, and asked the chef to create a custom menu based on her favorite dishes. I didn't just want to host a dinner, I wanted this to be an event that showed I saw her as family. I reached out to her longtime friends and sent out invitations printed on custom-assigned cards. I even considered preparing a short video of family memories to play at the end of the evening. Throughout the planning, I tried to involve Kylie and Ethan, hoping we could work together on something meaningful. But all I got back were shrugs and cold replies like, "If you want to do it, go ahead." Not only did they refuse to help, they seemed irritated whenever I brought up the party. Mason saw it all. One evening as I was putting together the guest list, he sat beside me with a worried look. "Aurora," he said gently, "I know you mean well. But I'm afraid you're only setting yourself up to be hurt." I looked up and gave a half smile. "I'll be okay. Just this once. Maybe it'll make a difference." I didn't want to believe my efforts were pointless. I had to believe that kindness, even misunderstood, would eventually be appreciated. As the party day drew closer, I was filled with nervous excitement. I pictured Sylvia walking into the restaurant, surprised and touched, her friends cheering, and me standing there, smiling as she lit up with joy. I believed that after that night, the icy wall between me and Mason's family would start to melt. I poured my heart into every single detail of the party, as if it were my own special celebration. Nobody asked me to do it, I just did, spending countless long nights making sure everything was perfect. The restaurant I chose was Les Jardins, a well-known French spot with a warm vintage ambiance where Sylvia had once shared lovely memories with her late husband. As soon as you walk in, there's a soft scent of jasmine in the air and sparkling crystal chandeliers like tiny stars. I wanted that place to feel like a doorway to the happiest years of her life. I reserved a large private room overlooking a lavender garden, asked for candlelit tables, and had framed black and white family photos placed around the space. I carefully picked the tablecloths and dinnerware to match Sylvia's style. Elegant, understated. The menu wasn't basic either. After several consultations with the head chef, I settled on her favorite traditional French dishes: seafood tart, French onion soup, beef bourguignon and red wine sauce, and millefoya for dessert. Every course was like a love letter to her youth. I also personally created the guest list: old friends from her book club, distant relatives, and former co-workers I had to track down through Mason's friends. I customized each invitation, handwriting notes and including a map to the restaurant. Night after night I wrote until my fingers ached, but my heart was hopeful. While I was deep in preparations, Kylie and Ethan acted like none of it mattered to them. One time I asked, "Kylie, would you like to help pick a song for the opening? I think Sylvie would be thrilled if you joined in." Kylie smirked without even looking up from her phone. "You're throwing the party, you decide, I'm busy." Ethan was even more blunt. When I asked if he wanted to weigh in on the menu, he scoffed. "Why bother? She's just going to complain anyway." His words felt like cold water thrown at all my effort, but I told myself, it's fine. I'm not doing this for praise. I'm doing it to stay true to myself. The party wasn't cheap either. Just the deposit for the venue and the custom menu cost over $4,500. 0 cents. Not including decorations, invitations, and the personalized gift I got for Sylvia. A white gold bracelet engraved with the names of her 3 children. Something I thought might truly touch her heart. Mason knew everything, but he didn't interfere. He let me lead the way, though sometimes I caught a flicker of concern in his eyes. Are you sure about this? I'm sure, I smiled, hiding the growing unease inside me. Every day I poured myself into the details like a patient artisan. I pictured Sylvia's face glowing with surprise and joy as she walked into the room, overwhelmed by how much care had gone into it. I kept thinking, any mother, any at all, seeing someone put in that much love, would surely feel moved. What I didn't know was that in less than 24 hours that beautiful vision would shatter like glass on cold stone. And from that moment on, my life with Mason's family would turn to an entirely different page. One that could never be turned back. That day, Mason and I went to his mother's house to officially invite her to the party. On the way, I clutched the invitation card with all the details, heart pounding with anticipation. I imagined Sylvia tearing up, hugging me, and all our misunderstandings melting away. When we arrived, Kylie and Ethan were already there, sprawled on the couch, glued to their phones, barely looking up when they heard the door open. Sylvia was out on the porch, trimming her flower pots, looking as busy as ever. I walked up, smiling, handed her the card with both hands. I'd love for you to join us at Le Jardin tomorrow night. Please take this evening just for yourself. Everything has been prepared just for you. Sylvia took the card, glanced over it, then looked up at me. At first, she gave me a faint smile, polite at best. I exhaled a small breath of relief. But that flicker of hope lasted no more than a few seconds. Oh, thank you, Aurora, she said, her voice so sweet it sent a chill down my spine. It was fake to the bone. But... She dragged out the word, her eyes gleaming coldly. I won't be coming. I froze. The room felt like it turned to ice. Mason frowned, while Kylie and Ethan exchanged smug looks like they were about to watch some juicy drama. Well, why not? I tried to keep my voice steady, though my hands had started to tremble. Sylvia placed the invitation on the table and sighed, feigning regret. I want my 50th birthday to be a family gathering. People who are truly family, you understand? I consider my longtime friends family too, but not you, Aurora. You're just an outsider. Each word cut like a tiny blade, tearing through the hope I had left. I swallowed hard and looked at Mason. His fists were clenched, his face dark. Kylie gave a little cough, acting annoyed. Not a big surprise, what's the shock about? Ethan chimed in, not even hiding his glee. Everyone already knew, except you. Their words, casual but cruel, hit my pride like stones. I took a deep breath to keep the tears back. One last attempt to salvage it, I asked, do you even know who I invited? Your closest friends, the people you always said you cared about. I made sure the menu had all your favorites. Sylvia shrugged, her face indifferent in the most heartbreaking way. I know. But your presence would make me uncomfortable. And if you really cared about how I feel, then you wouldn't come. The room spun, everything I had hoped for shattered right in front of me. I stood tall, forcing all my anger and pain into each breath. Very well, I said, my voice colder than ever. If I'm not your family, don't expect anything from me again. Sylvia's face darkened, but before she could say a word I turned and walked out, Mason trailing behind me, his face pale with fury. Behind us I heard Kylie giggle. Talk about embarrassing yourself. That one sentence was the final nail in the coffin of everything I had poured into that party. On the drive home, no one said a word. Mason gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. I just stared out the window, where the night swallowed the last flickers of hope inside me. That night, back home, I sat motionless on the couch, staring at the invitation Sylvia had left behind on the table. My heart felt like it was carrying the weight of every effort, every bit of care I had given, crushed without a second thought. Mason sat beside me and placed a hand on my shoulder. You don't deserve to be treated like this, he said softly, his voice tight with restrained anger. I lifted my head, feeling something shift inside me. If they didn't want me in their lives, then I wasn't going to keep playing the background character in a story where I was never respected. Without hesitation, I grabbed my phone and called Les Jardins. "Hi, I'd like to cancel the party I booked for tomorrow," I said firmly. "We've got a lot." "Are you sure?" the manager asked. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tightly. Yes. But instead of canceling completely, I want to turn it into a private celebration, with my real friends and chosen family." Within hours, I texted my closest friends, Emma, Brooke, and Madison, my rock-solid circle through every high and low. I even invited a few co-workers I genuinely adored. Everyone replied with excitement, especially when I said I needed a night to cleanse all the negative energy. The next morning, Mason and I arrived early at the restaurant to rearrange everything. I asked the staff to take down all the family photos of Sylvia and replace them with lavender wreaths, scented candles, and soft, warm lighting. The whole vibe shifted, light, joyful, and free of any heaviness. That evening, my friends arrived, filling the room with laughter and love. We raised our glasses not for any milestone but to celebrate friendship, strength, and dignity. Mason invited a few of his close friends too, and it became a real party, the kind filled only with joy and authenticity. In that glow, I couldn't resist posting a few photos online. There I was, glowing in the middle of people who truly loved me, raising my glass with a smile bright and clear. Less than an hour later, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. A message from Kylie. "You're seriously petty and selfish. You ruined my mom's 50th birthday just to feed your pathetic ego." I read it again and again, then scoffed. The irony. The ones who did nothing, who didn't lift a finger, were now blaming me? I typed back without hesitation. "Your mom never wanted me there in the first place. I'm just enjoying the party I paid for. Have a nice evening." I didn't wait for a reply. I shut off my phone, dropped it in my purse, and turned back to my friends. No one was going to ruin a single second of this night. Deep down, I knew I'd done the right thing. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't second-guess whether I had tried hard enough. I gave them every chance, and they chose to reject it. That night, as we got home, Mason held my hand tightly under the soft glow of the hallway light. He didn't have to say anything. His eyes said it all: pride, love, and deep, unwavering understanding. I stood in front of the mirror and saw a different Aurora. Stronger, clearer, and finally free from trying to please people who never deserved my efforts. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never let anyone treat me that way again. The next morning, with the pale sunlight filtering through the curtains, Mason sat quietly at the edge of the bed, gripping his phone. I knew he hadn't slept, turning everything over in his mind. I poured 2 cups of coffee, set one next to him, and sat down across from him in silence. Finally, Mason exhaled deeply, his voice low and heavy, like each word carried a weight he could barely lift. "Uro, I've made up my mind. I'm cutting them off completely." I blinked, heart thudding. "You mean no more contact?" "Not just contact," Mason said, his tone firm. "I'm done sending them money. No more financial support. No more fixing the chaos they create." He leaned back against the wall, hands clasped together, eyes distant like he was remembering something painfully old. "I never told you the full story," Mason began, his voice tight. "When my dad passed, I was only 22. Ethan and Kylie were still in school. Mom had never worked a single day. The money Dad left didn't come close to covering our expenses. I gave up grad school and worked non-stop to support them. I stayed quiet, my heartbeat quickening. At first, I did it willingly. They were my family. But over time, they came to expect it. They stopped trying. They never grew up. They just waited for the next check, like it was my duty." His voice dropped, touched with bitterness. "And then you came into my life. That's when things changed. First it was the passive comments, then direct ones. You were a threat to the supply they relied on. They treated you badly, not because of anything you did, but because they were afraid of losing the ATM they've leaned on for almost 10 years. I bit my lip, fighting back tears. Suddenly, all the cold stares, the snide remarks, the unexplained tension, it all made sense. The whole ugly truth snapped into place. "I get it," I whispered, "but Mason, are you sure? This is a big step." He nodded, more certain than ever. I've waited too long already, Aurora. I thought if I kept sacrificing they'd change, but the truth is, greed has no limit. If I don't protect myself and protect you, I'll stay stuck in this cycle forever. I reached for his hand and squeezed it tightly. Whatever you decide, I'm with you, I said firmly. Mason smiled, the first real smile I'd seen in days. He leaned in and kissed my forehead. Thank you, Aurora. If it weren't for you, I don't think I'd ever have had the strength to do this. That very morning, Mason typed out a long message and sent it to Sylvia, Kylie, and Ethan. It was direct and to the point. From now on, he would no longer provide any financial support. He hoped they would grow up and become independent like actual adults. And if they couldn't accept that, then their relationship with him ended right there. Within minutes, Mason's phone lit up non-stop. Message after message came pouring in, blaming, threatening, even begging. I saw his expression falter for a moment, but he didn't respond to a single word. Instead, he set his phone down and wrapped his arms around me, like he was seeking peace in the only place he had left. I knew this was just the beginning. They wouldn't back down so easily. But at least, from that moment on, we had chosen to stand together, no longer letting anyone else dictate our lives. Just one day after Mason sent that message, the storm from his family hit without warning. A barrage of texts came in from Sylvia, Kylie, and Ethan. Every trace of civility was gone. The words were harsh, biting. So much so that I had to keep blocking them just to avoid being pulled into their spiral of negativity. You're a venomous snake, Aurora. You poisoned Mason and turned him against his own mother and siblings. A message from Kylie. You don't deserve to be his wife. If his father were still alive, he'd be ashamed of you. Ethan, with zero attempt to hide his disgust. Sylvia, my mother-in-law, wasn't any better. A long string of blame, accusations, and even threats. She claimed I had torn the family apart for my own selfish reasons. I stared at the phone, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. They were acting like Mason was some sort of money dispenser and I was the thief who stole what they thought they were entitled to. Mason was different. He looked at each message, each missed call, without saying a word. Only his clenched fists showed the fire burning inside. I gently took the phone from his hands and set it on the table. You don't need to read any of this, I said calmly. Mason let out a breath and leaned his head on my shoulder. I know, I can't believe they were ever my family. We decided to block them on every platform, calls, messages, social media, even email. But even then, news about us kept trickling in through mutual contacts. Every day, someone would message to say Sylvia was going around telling people about her ungrateful son, or that Kylie was complaining her sister-in-law destroyed their family. One evening while I was prepping dinner, Mason walked into the kitchen with a somber look. Aurora? You should probably know about this. What is it? I asked, plating the vegetables. He placed a file on the table. I just got this from the lawyer. Sylvia's planning to sue me for repayment of what she claims I owe them since... I froze. My utensils clattered against the plate. Owe them? But you've supported them for years, I nearly shouted. I know, Mason said with a bitter nod. But they're claiming that when I used part of my inheritance to start my business, I was stealing from the whole family. Now they want their cut. I sat down, stunned, like someone had just poured a bucket of ice water over my head. Mason looked at me, his eyes resolute. I'm going to fight this. I have nothing left to lose but my self-respect. Hearing that, I felt a deep wave of admiration for the man sitting across from me. Despite the betrayal, despite being turned on by his own blood, he still stood firm, grounded in pride and dignity that couldn't be shaken. The days that followed were filled with tension. Every time Mason left the house, I silently hoped he'd stay strong against the toxic mind games Sylvia and his siblings were playing. I also made a silent vow. I would not let anyone destroy the peace we had fought so hard to create. And, in a rare quiet moment amid the chaos, I realized something. We weren't just fighting against his family's greed. We were fighting for our right to live freely, on our own terms, without the weight of relationships built solely on control and dependency. That evening, while I was finishing dinner and Mason was handling work emails in the office, the doorbell rang, fast and aggressive, like someone pounding out their rage onto our front door. I looked at Mason. He glanced up, his expression heavy. I think I know who it is, he said quietly. I took a deep breath and walked straight to the door. Through the small glass pane, I saw Sylvia, flanked by Kylie and Ethan. Their faces were stone cold, eyes blazing with fury. I opened the door, staying right in the doorway, blocking them from entering. Aurora, we need to talk, Sylvia snapped, her voice sharp as ice. If it's just to insult me and Mason again, I don't see the point in wasting our time, I replied, strangely calm. But they pushed past me, like they had forgotten they no longer had any right to just walk into this house. Sylvia planted herself in the middle of the living room, looking around like she still owned the place, then turned to Mason, who had just stepped out of the office. Mason, I can't believe you treat your own family like this, all because of her. Kylie jumped in. She made you turn your back on your own blood. You're a disgrace. Ethan sneered. We put up with so much over the years and now you throw it all away for an outsider? I crossed my arms, meeting each of their stares. It was time to stop playing nice. An outsider? I said with a cold laugh. I may be one to you, but what about Mason? Is he still family to you, or is he just a walking credit card in your eyes? Sylvia's eyes bulged. Don't you dare speak to me like that. If it weren't for me and his siblings, he wouldn't be where he is today. Oh, really? I raised an eyebrow, my words sharp as blades. If it weren't for them, Mason wouldn't have had to drop out of school and work himself to the bone just to support everyone. If it weren't for them, he wouldn't have carried burdens no young man should ever carry. The room fell silent. I stepped forward, fearless now. You've leeched off him his entire adult life. No work, no effort, just endless demands, and now you stand here blaming him? Have you ever once asked yourselves what you've done for him? Sylvia flushed red, stammering. We're family. Families help each other. Help? I scoffed. Help doesn't mean exploitation. It doesn't mean draining someone until there's nothing left. Real families don't force a choice between freedom and obligation, between happiness and guilt. Kylie burst into tears, her go-to move. But I didn't flinch. Ethan's fists clenched in frustration. I looked Sylvia dead in the eye. I'm asking you to leave our home. You no longer have the right to walk in here like it belongs to you. Sylvia shouted. Mason, are you really going to let her talk to your mother like this? Mason stepped forward and stood between us. I'm not just standing here, he said, voice low but firm. I'm protecting my real family. Sylvia, Kylie, and Ethan were stunned into silence. If you still value this family, Mason continued, then it's time to stand on your own. Don't expect anything else from me. Without waiting for a reply, I opened the door and motioned them out. An eerie silence filled the air as they walked out, only the sound of shoes on hardwood and the wind rustling outside. When the door finally closed, Mason turned to me and pulled me into a tight hug, like we were trying to absorb each other's pain and wash it all away. I knew this wasn't the end, but at least today we stood up for ourselves. Just 3 days after that explosive confrontation, a certified letter arrived at our doorstep. Mason opened it first. I saw his hand pause mid-turn, his face hardening into ice. I walked over, concerned. What is it? He didn't answer right away. He just handed me the paper, his lips pressed tight. It was a court summons. His family, led by Sylvia, had officially filed a lawsuit against Mason, accusing him of illegally withholding inheritance after his father's death. They were demanding a large sum of money, claiming it should have been divided equally among all family members. I stared at the paper, fury rising in my chest. They really had the nerve to do this? After everything you've done for them? Mason just nodded, his face calm but steely. We immediately contacted our lawyer Mark Anderson, the same one who had helped Mason with several major business deals. Mark arrived that same day, carrying a thick folder of documents. After a few hours of reviewing everything, Mark looked up and said confidently, "We are in a strong position. The assets they're referring to were already legally divided according to the will. Mason, your share was just 20%, and you used your own portion to start your company. The rest? Your mother and siblings spent theirs years ago." I squeezed Mason's hand under the table, my eyes filled with determination. We're not letting them push us around ever again. The court date was set for 3 weeks later. That waiting period felt like a test of endurance. Every day, Sylvia and Kylie spread rumors around town, painting Mason as someone who robbed his widowed mother and orphaned siblings of their inheritance. Some acquaintances even started whispering behind our backs, throwing us curious, judgmental looks. Mason bore it all in silence, but I knew he was bleeding on the inside. On the day of the trial, Sylvia and her 2 children showed up in formal clothes, wearing smug expressions. Mason, on the other hand, wore a simple gray suit, calm and composed, like a warrior ready for his final battle. Mark presented every piece of evidence to the judge: copies of the will, bank statements, Mason's original investment contracts. All of it clearly showed Mason had never touched a cent beyond his rightful share, and that his entire business was built by his own hands. Meanwhile, the other side had nothing but baseless accusations and emotional pleas. They dodged every direct question from our lawyer, refusing to back their claims with facts. At the end of a long, tense day, the judge read the verdict. Based on the evidence submitted, the court finds Mason not guilty of any misappropriation of inheritance. Furthermore, the plaintiffs, Miss Sylvia and her 2 children, are ordered to compensate Mason for legal fees and defamation damages. In that moment, I squeezed Mason's hand tighter. He gave me a faint smile, relieved but tinged with sorrow. Quote, across the courtroom, Sylvia and her children sat frozen, stunned. Kylie burst into loud sobs. Ethan slammed his hand on the table, his face flushed with rage. As for me, I felt one thing: freedom. In the days that followed, news of their courtroom defeat spread quickly throughout town. Sylvia's family became the subject of gossip, avoided and shunned by neighbors. Kylie's boutique closed after customers stopped coming. Ethan, once proud of being the pampered son, remained unemployed. And us? We slowly reclaimed our peace. Mason returned to running his company. I picked up interior design again, for the first time in years, without the looming fear that his family might tear everything apart. One evening, while we sat on the porch sipping warm tea in the cool fall breeze, Mason held my hand and whispered, "Aurora, thank you. I couldn't have made it through without you." I rested my head on his shoulder and replied softly, "We have each other. That's all we need." Outside, golden leaves floated in the wind, as if carrying away all the pain from the past, clearing the way for a new chapter full of hope. Word of Sylvia and her children's humiliating loss traveled fast, spreading like quiet sparks, igniting in every coffee shop conversation, every church gathering, every busy street. It didn't take long for even those who once stayed neutral to see them in a new light. The stories they had spun about Mason were now exposed as bitter jokes. Distant relatives who once kept in touch out of politeness finally cut ties. No more weekend invites, no more casual texts, just cold silence. Sylvia, once proud of being the devoted mother, retreated into a cramped rental on the outskirts of town. Kylie, with no store to run, took a job as a cashier at a small supermarket. Every shift, a reminder that her days of freeloading were over. Ethan, after months of unemployment, ended up hauling boxes at a warehouse over 20 miles from town. No matter how much they blamed or resented us, the truth remained: the easy life was over. As for Mason and me, we began embracing our new life, a life free from guilt trips, demands, and invisible burdens hanging over every dinner table. We moved into a smaller but cozier house on the edge of town. Every morning I woke to birdsong in the backyard, and Mason tended to his green garden like he was healing wounds he no longer had to hide. We hosted simple dinners with friends, the kind who truly cared about us, not for money or status. Laughter filled our little home, blending with golden sunlight through the kitchen windows. One breezy afternoon, sitting on the porch watching leaves swirl through the air, Mason turned to me with emotion in his voice. "Aurora, I never thought happiness could be this simple. Just having you. Everything else feels unimportant." As I took his hand, feeling its warmth spread into mine. "We've been through so much to get here," I whispered. "And I believe all that pain, it was leading us to this moment." We no longer resented the past, no longer mourned what was lost. Instead, we were grateful for the falls that taught us how to rise stronger, wiser, and to love more deeply. One day, while sorting old papers, I came across a letter Mason had written to me during the first year we met. In it, he said he hoped to someday build a home where love, respect, and trust lived above all else. I smiled, realizing that dream, buried for so long under years of noise and conflict, had finally come true. We had broken free from the heavy shadows of our past and stepped into the life we truly deserved, one of peace, freedom, and genuine love. Our story is proof that sometimes, to find real peace, you have to be brave enough to walk away from toxic relationships, even when they are tied by blood. Love, respect, and dignity should never be the price you pay for blind loyalty. Only when we stood up for ourselves did life truly begin. And now, every day, we live in gratitude for choosing ourselves, no matter how hard it was. What do you think of our journey? Would you have done the same if you were in our shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and powerful family stories.